Today, I'd like to talk about the term consciousness or being conscious, because this is the most important thing for everyone, but especially on this channel, which is investigating things from the spiritual side. I raise this point because in all the sciences, they define consciousness only as the human consciousness, only as the subjective experience. They define it somehow like being aware who am I and what's around me. That's their definition of consciousness. But this is only ego consciousness. This is only I and my world and my social surroundings, and that is the whole current psychology research. Neuroscience goes a little bit further, investigating the brain, having good machines nowadays. Not only EEG, but even fMRI, they can see many things happening in the brain. And they try to locate even the consciousness. And there are many theories saying this, saying that, but nobody really comes to a conclusion and really can explain where consciousness comes from and how it really works. But before it comes to these further questions, where it comes from and how it works, we should really look what it actually is. It's a very basic question. Maybe for some researchers too dry to investigate. That's why maybe they ignore this basic question of the being of the consciousness itself, the being. What exactly is the consciousness? Even beyond its subjective person view, beyond subjective perception, because animals can perceive it different. There are some animals who can perceive ultrasound, who can perceive ultraviolet. That is already evidence that our human consciousness is so much limited, because even animals who are less intelligent than us have other abilities, have extra abilities. That is only one small evidence that looking at the consciousness only as a subjective thing is too poor, what the research does. Because this is even more poor compared to animals sometimes. Actually, we should ask where the intelligence comes from, not only where the consciousness comes from. But on that later maybe. Now we must investigate what is consciousness beyond the limited perspective, the limited subjective experience of a human mind or of a person. What is consciousness itself? In their research, they had already investigated people who had a damaged brain from an accident, and they could even differ between consciousness and brain. People with some damaged brain areas, after all their theories, they couldn't actually make decisions, but still they could, throughout many tests, do again and again very good decisions. So the consciousness is not located somewhere in the brain, maybe. That's one important aspect. And one more evidence that there is maybe something like consciousness beyond the limitations of our skin, or especially beyond the brain. Because somehow they were making good decisions without having the brain. But this doesn't even explain our main question, which is what consciousness actually is. This is still limited to the location, which may be a later question. Now, some spiritual people go even further and say, yes, I know what consciousness really is. And even that is limited. I will show you that. Because they say, if you are 100% focusing on something, if you are 100% present in the here and now, then you are conscious, they say. Here's even a problem with the here and now. I have made an extra video. But then you are not conscious enough. Still, it is human consciousness, but better focused human consciousness. Most humans are distracted all the time. Some distract themselves consciously each and every day through the phone, through all these media things. and don't know even about anything about consciousness. They are not considering if they have one or not, or if there are some development opportunities. They are just distracting and don't care about anything. And others have certain goals in their life. They want to create something. They want to improve somehow. And so they need concentration. And so they give effort to give concentration. And when one starts the very first time to concentrate, it can happen that it's not so easy. Because beyond the distraction, which we do extra on these media things, also inside of the human mind, there is some distraction. There are uncontrolled emotions, there are uncontrolled thoughts, and even negative ones, even suppressed ones, which were from childhood traumas or anything from the past. There are many things happening, and people who develop through kind of psychotherapy or even only through a diary or whatever you can support to gain more concentration is first of all good to reach 100% control, but that is not the full consciousness. Still, it is human consciousness, but only 100% focused on one thing and not so distracted like all the others. So from all of the chaos which is in the human consciousness, a person created in order to focus on a thing. 100%. Then they believe this is 100% consciousness. But still human consciousness, because it is thinking. And thinking belongs to the ego, is even also located after many studies in the human mind, in the brain, in the neocortex. And again, it causes new suppression because 100% thinking requires suppressing of emotions at the same time. But means, again, it can happen that even to concentrate on a thing, to suppress emotions, can happen that emotions got stronger in the suppressed areas in what we call unconscious. And of course, then later on, the chaos appears again and the concentration is not possible. And there we could exactly see that there is still the human consciousness which can distract again and again. Only for a while concentration is possible. And latest after the sleep. Or something happens, a call comes, a call appears, another unconscious person who is more unconscious, who is not so focused, who is more distracted, calls and distracts us with his words, and suddenly all the concentration went. And again, chaos is there. And when this happens, this is a sign that this person is still in the human consciousness, because it's normal. The human consciousness is very easy to distract. Even with many years of hard work, of being 100% conscious, of being able to focus, of being able to read long books or do long tasks, still it is possible an aggressive person enters the room or anything happens and the conscious person suddenly gets so much unconscious. So that can't be the real consciousness when this person still gets unconscious only from one call or something. I will try something. I want to try to explain it with a Bible proverb, because here it comes clear that we are not as conscious as we believe we are. In Proverbs 16, verse 9, we can read after New King James Version, but they are similar. A man's heart plans his way. With heart is including the mind, but the Lord directs his steps. On other versions, which version can be impressive? Let's take the easy to read version. Maybe that can give now more evidence. People can plan what they want to do, but it is the Lord who guides their steps. Yeah, so such a similar one I had in my German Bible also. The shortest version I could ever find was saying, human plans, but God is leading them still somehow. Something like that. And here the word guides, I like that. That's why I like this version here. So people, whatever they do consciously with their mind or with anything of their perception, still God can intervene. You see this on bigger things, when things happen in the world, like a small virus can change so many things, and we don't know where these things come from. They can come from nature, they can come from God when He intervenes somehow in the nature. And so it is with the consciousness. So there is a higher consciousness. Let's just state what the religion stated, that there is something of God. And there is this human consciousness, which is so limited that here it appears like a joke, that people plan and plan and plan, and they waste so much time in planning and in calculating and in arranging and organizing, and finally God intervenes and all their plans were useless and they have wasted so much time in planning for nothing. So it happens often in life. And here we can see there is a bigger consciousness, a higher consciousness, God, and the human consciousness. But this is a split. This is still duality. From our human consciousness, it appears that God intervenes somehow, but we also must have something like a connection to God. Otherwise, He couldn't intervene. There must be something in between. And these things, or this aspect, some call higher consciousness. In the Bible, it is differed between inner man and outer man. Outer man is the ego. That part here, what plans, that is the outer man, with Paul's words in Paul's letters. And the higher self is the inner man. And you always say you have to turn the inner to the outer. So that means you must find your inner self, your higher self first. And then you can act out of it in the outside world also and influence the outer man, this planning consciousness here. And there is the connection to God. Or even with modern psychology, Carl Jung says that we can only experience God through the higher self. So there is something like a higher consciousness also. So the aspect here is to come to a point where God leads us, we have to give up the normal, limited, subjective consciousness and to go into something higher. And as we could see from the proverb, that the normal subjective consciousness is something like where thinking is involved, planning, calculating, logical thinking, rational thinking. That is the human limited consciousness, which is only observing its perception, interpreting what he's seeing and its perception. That's why I said all the research is limited. And finally, is normally not able to overcome that. That's, of course, why we can't see ultraviolet or other things which other animals can perceive, and which obviously shows that there must be more consciousness than only ours, because that would be selfish only to say that we humans have the consciousness. And even this, the research already overcame. They say now, okay, the animals have consciousness also, but there is only that thing left that still, it appears somehow haughty or negative proud to say we have the consciousness, we are the biggest in the whole evolution. And yes, but only if we overcome this subjectivity. Because if other animals could speak, they could also say, oh no, we are bigger because we have a sixth sense, or we have one sense more. We can see ultraviolet or ultrasound. So that doesn't mean we are the most intelligent, as far as we are not developing the higher consciousness. What means developing means actually it is there. The thing is, as all mysticals and all philosophers say, who are about the deeper aspects of life, there is something which was already there, kind of like an undieable soul, and it is overwhelmed from the ego all the time, from the thinking. The thinking is like building many stones like a thick wall, and so suppressing, which is actually bigger and higher, which is the true consciousness, the actual consciousness, because the ego wants to make himself always bigger. But actually the ego is only a small part from the whole consciousness, and all the billions of egos are only a small part, and everyone wants unconsciously to make himself bigger, even the good ones, even the nice, kind, cheap in the church every Sunday. Even they are arguing with each other from time to time. That's human nature, that's ego nature. And this thinking is what keeps us in this normal consciousness, which is limited. This planning, this overwhelming all the time. So we must come in a state of non-thinking. People who take heavy drugs know that. Some had experience, but that is not the best way. Meditators know that. That's a better way. Finally, here you can say it's good to come in kind of a contemplation, a deeper meditation. Here is the misunderstanding in the cultures, meditation, contemplation. There's an extra video on that. But research and researchers now will not accept what I'm saying, because the thinker, which also is involved in the research, will say that, no, we can't let go thinking. We will lose our common sense. That's the very first thought when someone is talking about meditation or deeper meditations and letting go even thinking, because there is no trust that there is a consciousness behind. But actually, researchers here must just observe the research with the brain damage, which I mentioned, and that there is something behind which still could make right and good decisions for these people who were victims from something. So there is something which can, and why to overcome, not only to overcome the ego, which always makes himself great and never wants to humble. It is because the same ego is causing trouble, is causing the negative thoughts, is in the wrong being conscious, which some meditators believe with the here and now, with the wrong sort of here and now, to be 100% concentrated, and suddenly something happens and concentration absolutely breaks. And distraction is there again, and this is the problem, and that's why the thinking is the problem. And behind the thinking there's a higher thinking, a better one, which is only positive and has not negative disturbances. And that's why we should overcome the normal thinking and go in something higher. And that's why they also say in the Bible that God then intervenes, or that God then is leading or guiding, because this higher consciousness, as with Carl Jung, has the direct connection with God and takes the leading and goes in devotion. And yes, devotion is here the point. We have to go in devotion. We have to seek the right meditation methods to really go in devotion to that thing, that to make our consciousness open, and we'll feel far better than this normal human thinking, which is only causing trouble from time to time and is not leading out of the matrix of the whole problem. Coming out is only by overcoming. But here to find the right meditation methods, it's not easy. I have tried even to explain some, but even words are limited. But there's one essential video I could really recommend, which is about getting, first of all, access to meditation, because many meditators waste their time in sitting many hours at the same place and nothing happens. And that's why I really recommend to try first to get access to this inner consciousness, to this higher self, because without any meditation access, it's also lots of waste of time. Hope this video could help. Have a good time. See you soon. Bye.